that was a classic. That was proper taking me back to the 90s there with Chumbawamba Tub Thumping or something like that. I think I pronounced it all right. That was the choice of our special guest, our second special guest of this evening's show. So you listen to me, as always, Justin Hopper here on a Thursday night on La Vida Liverpool Lives, bringing you boss tunes and boss conversation from 5 till 7. We have two special guests. So for that first half of the show, we've been talking to Rusty Furman, SAS legend and national hero, the guy who responsible for stopping the embassy siege, the Iranian embassy siege there of 1980. And we've been talking about the Falklands War as well, because as you've probably seen from our social media, you know, it is the 40th anniversary of the Falklands War, a bloody battle between Argentina and Britain in 1982. So we've been having, you know, a few interviews about that recently. Last week we had Edward Denmark and Julio Herrera Vidal. Julio's come all the way over from Argentina for the 40th anniversary, meeting the British veterans. And we've had an amazing time down in Rockpoint Records there on Victoria Road. It's been very special, actually. The British veterans have been meeting Julio after 40 years of fighting against each other, you know, to build bridges and exchange stories about, you know, back in the day, 40 years ago, that war, and different people having different... It's interesting, because you speak to different people, different perspectives, you know, you get to learn the bigger picture, you know, about war when you hear different perspectives, piece it all together. And our second guest is one of the guys we met down there on Victoria Road, a local guy named Paul Carden. Paul is also a veteran. He was in the Royal Navy during the Falklands War conflict. And some years later, Paul's gone on to write a book he's recently released, Return to Bomb Alley, which exposes a lot of, you know, scandals and cover-ups and trying to piece together what actually happened. You know, taking lots of different information to try and look at some scandals of war. Paul is a local veteran and also, you know, a researcher. So he's done a lot of research and a lot of interesting subjects. So we're going to be talking about, you know, his book, you know, what's, you know, prompted him to become an author after these years. And, of course, going full circle, talking about, you know, what it was like being in the Falklands War from his perspective. So it's interesting to get different perspectives. So without further ado, let's introduce Paul. Thanks for coming in. How are you doing, my mate?
I'm okay, thanks, Justin.
Yeah, it was great to meet you down in Rockpoint Records. I've seen your book floating around. I think you're in the Wirral Globe with it, weren't you, I think?
That's right, yeah. They did an article on the book a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
I was very grateful for that because it was a good article that summed up the book very well.
Yeah, and you, I think I saw recently on social media again before, you know, I've been seeing your book floating around and stuff like that before we actually met. So I did see that there's a big book launch at Lingham's, I believe, in Heswall. Is that right?
That's right. That was last Saturday. I was down at Lingham's, and it was a fascinating day because I had a desk sort of set aside and all my bits and bobs on the desk and my books sort of piled up on the desk. I had people coming past and obviously very interested in the Falklands with it being in the news at the moment. So I had a couple of fascinating conversations with some of the customers down at Lingham's.
Yeah, so, I mean, you're obviously doing something right with a book to get it into a big bookshop like that, you know. So we'll be talking about that. We'll be talking about, you know, what the book's about in essence, because it's a fascinating subject. You know, I love myself, you know, I'm one of those, shall we say, more open-minded people who, you know, likes to question what's really going on. I think there's always something more than meets the eye. So we're going to be talking about that, you know, which I can't wait to get stuck into. But as we always do, let's go full circle with that, Paul. Let's go into, you know, let's start from the beginning, which just kind of makes sense. So tell us about you as a young lad. Were you brought up round here? And as a young lad, you know, tell us about what it was like going into the Navy and the Falklands War. Tell us about, you know, going into the Falklands War, what was like for your perspective, and what was your role there?
Okay. Well, I'm going to take you right back to the start, the very start. I was born on the back kitchen floor in 14 Ricehay Road, Wallasey.
Oh yeah, nice local.
Wallasey, Cheshire it was then, but as we know, it's things change. It's now Wallasey, Merseyside.
Yeah.
But I think I was probably about 10, and just sat in the back room, and I put the telly on, and Blue Peter was on. And I don't know whether you remember, Justin, there's somebody called John Noakes, and he was a bit of a daredevil. He used to get up to all these crazy things, and when I switched this telly on, he'd gone with a camera crew down to HMS Ganges, which was the Royal Navy training establishment in Ipswich, near Ipswich in Suffolk. And at this base, they had a massive big ship's mast. It was actually built from 2 ships, and it was 140 feet tall.
Yeah.
Massive big thing. What they used to do once a year, they get about 80 young trainee sailors, all with their uniforms on, and then they'd start climbing up the mast. And the bravest of those lads would go right to the top. And honest to God, and at the top was a piece of circular wood about a foot in diameter.
Yeah.
And John Noakes went all the way to the top. I thought John Noakes was going to get on the top, but he didn't. This young lad got on the top, stood to attention and saluted. And there's me, 10-year-old kid, thinking, wow, that is amazing. And that's where I got the incentive, really, to join the Navy,
Okay.
And you could say it's BBC propaganda, isn't it? And I think you'd be right if you said that.
Yeah.
Because I'll tell you what, there would have been a load of young lads thinking, I'm going to do that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the advocates are still, to join the forces and whatnot. They're still, the strong, powerful advocates these days, aren't they? Still.
Oh, too right.
But I mean, with your so you went. Rusty was saying at the time he was sort of like forced into the army. But for you with the Navy, it all stemmed from then as young lad. Is that something you always wanted to do? What was your motivation? Was it like to be this guy in uniform and be brave and whatnot? But was it also to travel the world? Was that a big pull?
I think more travelling the world was what I wanted to do as a 16-year-old. As 16 and a half when I joined the Navy. And I considered the army and I thought, Northern Ireland, don't really fancy that, so I thought, let's stay safe. Ironically, let's stay safe, join the Navy. And so I did, and my first ship was HMS Plymouth after I'd done my training, sort of thing.
So did you go, like, before the Falklands conflict of 1982, were you going all around the world in the Navy? Do you think this is a great life?
Yeah, on HMS Plymouth we went over to America, we went all around the Mediterranean.
Nice.
France, Italy.
Free holidays by the sounds of it, but it wasn't all play though, right?
No, it was work as well. You're doing your job as well. I was a leading radio operator by the time I left the Navy, so I was at the heart of receiving all the messages, and that's how it was in the Falklands. I saw everything confidential and below. I read, and so I knew what was going on when I was down there.
Yeah. And last week our guest Edward Denmark, who you've met as well down in New Brighton there, Eddie was saying when he was sort of as a rapier gunner, he was sailing into the Falkland Islands in 1982, and Eddie was saying, someone's going to intervene, this ain't going to go off this war, there's no chance. Is that what you felt yourself?
Well, yeah, and I think there were peace proposals coming forward regularly, and as we were sailing down there, we got to Ascension Island, and as we were sailing, we were obviously I'm in the radio room, and we had the World Service on all the time. Often we got more news from the World Service than we got from the equipment around us. But to be honest, we were monitoring these peace proposals as they came out, and I got the sense that they weren't being treated seriously sometimes.
Yeah.
And on both sides, Argentina and the UK, I think they often used them to buy time while they sort of armed their forces and all that sort of stuff going on. So I didn't think the peace proposals were ever going to work. And there was one in particular which came to fruition around the end of April, start of May. And that came from Peru. It came from the Peruvian president, President Berlond. And on May the 1st, 1982, he sent his finalised proposal to Charles Wallace, who was the a British ambassador in Lima, in Peru, and for onward transmission by telegram to London. Now, that was sent on the 1st of May, allegedly, as far as I know. I'm not totally sure on that, but the 1st of May, that was sent. That was the day before the Belgrano was sunk.
Yeah.
Now, Mrs. Thatcher, a year later, claimed that it took 17 hours for that telegram to arrive.
Okay.
And as I've said, I was a leading radio operator. I was sending telegrams all the time, especially after the war, when the lads wanted to send telegrams back to their families and say they were okay.
Yeah.
You know? So we were sending them non-stop after the war. But I know for a fact that a telegram is sent and received within seconds.
Yeah.
Back then in '82 as well, it's in seconds, you know.
Yeah.
So that, I think something went on there. And just to add, while I was doing my research, I discovered that I couldn't trace that telegram at all. I went to the National Archives in the UK,
Wow.
couldn't spot it there. And then the answer, when I tried to find out where it was, I discovered that there was an embargo on all incoming telegrams sent between 2nd of April, which was the day of the invasion,
That's funny.
and the 15th of August, which sort of covered the whole war. So any telegram coming in from the South Atlantic area or the continent, we will not see until the year 2052. So they've added another 40 years onto that information, and that makes me think, what have they got to hide, really?
So, in essence, your book is a lot about, you know, things like this. You've done a lot of research. You've seen a lot of cover-ups, scandals, and what you're saying, in essence, is the Falklands War of 1982. There's a lot more to this than meets the eye.
Well,
now, what's interesting is that, you know, you were a radio operator, so, you know, back in the day, before mobile phones, the internet, or anything like that, you know, say telegrams and radio, you're one of the people who got to know a lot of information, shall we say, which is very interesting in itself. But, yeah, let's talk a bit more about this then, obviously, because, you know, you've released this book recently. Is the book... So tell us from your perspective. Let's go into that then. Tell us from your perspective, what, in essence, is the book about?
Yeah, right. We need to go back, really, to 1980, 81. Well, if we start in 79, Mrs. Thatcher was elected in May 79.
Mm-hmm.
And she came in on a high. A lot of female voters voted her in, and that gave her a big boost. And I think that's how she got in at the start, because women voters thought this is going to be different, having a woman in charge. It certainly was different, but and now I'll go on to tell you about 1980. Rusty's already told us about the details of the embassy siege.
Yeah.
And after that, the successful conclusion to that, Mrs. Thatcher was on a high, and to be honest, she could only go down after that. And she certainly did go down after that. And I think, if I give you some of the background to that, she had some very unforgiving economic policies which happened to affect working people.
Well, there's all the strikes and the mines,
that's right.
miners' strikes and that, wasn't there?
Yeah, well, that was a bit later, in sort of 84.
Okay.
But back then, she was sort of laying the groundwork for what she was going to do in the future. And these policies were really unforgiving on working people. Very quickly, we had 3 million people unemployed in the UK.
Yeah.
We had 18% inflation. And in the summer of 81, between April and July, we had riots breaking out in all the major cities in the UK. So we're talking about Liverpool. We're talking about
riots and everything.
Yeah, that's right, Toxteth, London, Birmingham, Manchester, all the major cities, riots breaking out.
So she was under a lot of pressure then, at that time.
She was, and the pressure just intensified as time went on,
Okay.
to be honest. But hundreds of senior economic... Sorry, I should say, she actually put taxes up, which is really unusual for a Conservative Party. They sort of rely on not doing that.
Yeah.
She did do it, against the advice of hundreds of senior economic experts. They advised that the industrial and manufacturing base would be adversely impacted, and it was.
Okay.
And you know, when we look back with hindsight to the 80s under Thatcher and what we've got now, industry is virtually gone. We've still got some, but industry and manufacturing was the basis of our economy back then. And wealth was shared out across the country because of that. She changed that and replaced it with a service sector that was sort of populated by bankers, insurance people, all this sort of stuff, and located it down in the city of London. And it's my opinion, this, but my opinion is that the wealth of the country has been concentrated there, and it tends to suck the wealth from the wider country down to that area, which is no good for anyone, really. If we one day go back to sort of honest to goodness manufacturing economy, then it would be a lot better for everybody. But I'm sorry, I'm going off the subject a little bit.
It's all right.
But by year end 1981, Margaret Thatcher's approval rating was down to 23%, which is the lowest on record for any UK Prime Minister. Even the likes of David Cameron, after Brexit, he was really unpopular, and Theresa May was unpopular, but she was even lower than those two, And now I need to tell you about, because it's my position is that she needed something to give it a rapid sort of about turn in her fortune.
So she needed the war. The war's a perfect
That's
fit.
right. And I think this war was foreseeable and avoidable, and it's often seen as a one-sided affair. People say, oh, bloody Galtieri invaded, didn't he, because of all his economic problems, that's why it happened. But we need to go back before that. It's not as one-sided as that.
Okay.
And I'll now go into a bit of detail on what that was all about. So Mrs. Thatcher and her ministers' 1980 and 1981 activities, much of that was concealed for the next 30 years, and that's under what's called the 30-year rule.
Okay.
Not everything she does, but what we don't see being done stays hidden for 30 years.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll now tell you what she was doing. She was doing high-level trade talks with the Argentine fascist junta.
Wow.
So she was sort of forging future cooperation between the two countries. And that was done behind the backs of the Falkland Islanders. They didn't know about that. They were sort of left on the sidelines. And then next we had arms deals going on between Argentina. This is 1980 now, and 81.
So just 2 years before the war, we had arms deals.
Yeah, we were arming the country. We were arming the junta up until 4 days before the invasion. So sort of 29th of March. They were still getting arms off
That's
the
insane.
UK. It's mad, isn't it?
So we have a war, with someone we were supplying, arms to 4 days earlier.
That's right.
That's insane.
And if we focus on the Falkland Islands again, Falkland Islanders, there's only 1,800 of them at the time. They were branded foreigners inside Mrs. Thatcher's 1981 British Nationality Act, and they were barred from settling in the UK. They weren't the only country. There were lots of other overseas dependencies that was done to, but the Falkland Islands was one of them.
So that shows that, we didn't see that really as our own. We were just like,
That's right.
saw them as foreigners.
She was basically sending signals to Argentina that we weren't that concerned about the Falkland Islands.
Yeah.
And if we look at the official, the sort of Sir Lawrence Freedman version of the history of the Falkland Islands, a lot of this is not given the treatment that it should have been, the adequate treatment.
Okay.
So people tend to forget about it, and along comes me, and it discovers it all. But anyway, and then if you go back to 1980, Nicholas Ridley, he was a foreign minister. He was dispatched on a top-secret mission to Geneva in Switzerland to meet the Argentine deputy foreign minister. And the subjects up for discussion were a 99-year leaseback deal and joint sovereignty for the Falkland Islands, where flag masts or flagpoles in the islands would fly both the Union flag and the Argentinian flag.
Okay.
And the government even put out a fake cover story saying that Nicholas Ridley and his wife had gone to Switzerland to paint watercolours by Lake Geneva. So they were putting out stupid stories to try and cover up what they were doing,
Okay.
So, and that was all done behind everybody's backs as well. So nobody knew about that until Lawrence Freedman discovered it in 2005, I think.
So in essence, what you're saying with all this is there's lots of underhanded dealings going on, and what you're suggesting is it was a planned war, and it was for PR for both, not just Galtieri on the Argentine side, but also for Maggie Thatcher. But of course, there was arms deals as well.
Justin, I haven't finished. There's more. There's much more that she
Go
did. She started doing what were sweeping defence cuts to UK armed forces, including the Navy. And one big feature of that was the removal of HMS Endurance from its patrolling waters in the South Atlantic.
Okay.
So this ship is sailing around the Falklands all the time.
Yeah.
And Mrs. Thatcher decides that she's going to decommission it and move it out
When
and get
was
rid
that?
of it.
How long before that was?
That was in 1981. And
Okay.
it was a lead up to the invasion. So the islands were virtually unprotected while that was happening.
Yeah.
And she was upsetting people like Lord Carrington, who said, look, we can't be doing that. It's not just a defensive statement to have HMS Endurance. It's also a political statement to show that we care about the islands and the islanders.
Yeah.
So, but she wouldn't listen to him, and he ended up resigning on April the 6th, 4 days after the invasion. And she also upset the First Sea Lord, who said, look, we've got a navy here. If you make these cuts to it, it needs to be able to react. If you make these cuts, it's not going to be able to react at the drop of a hat if we have an incident,
Yeah.
So that's what was going on. And all this was signalling to Argentina that Mrs. Thatcher mustn't have really cared.
Yeah.
And I think Galtieri probably made a calculation and thought, if I invade, it's unlikely to be contested by Britain,
Yeah.
I think that's probably what he was thinking when he invaded. So it wasn't as one-sided as a lot of people are saying.
So sort of like Maggie Thatcher sort of opened the door to it, basically, and said, there you go, just take it, we don't really care.
Everything she did that was later covered up, she got a couple of elections out the way after that without people knowing what had gone on, and they got voted in again.
Interesting. Well, we're going to take a quick song break, which is another one of your choices. You've chose a belter from the Jam. So we're going to play some of that, Paul, and then we'll go into a bit more detail about, obviously, what the book talks about in terms of the cover-ups of the war and things like that. And then we'll talk about, obviously, since you've been a radio operator there in the Falklands War, what you've really been doing since, and what sort of prompted you after all these years to put the book together. So I'm interested in hearing about that. But yeah, it's a very interesting subject. I mean, I suppose the lesson really is, the newspapers, the media, they'll only tell you one side of the story. Of course, the governments pay the media to publish certain stories and have certain slants on things. So, it's like marketing campaign, isn't it? It's propaganda. So you'll hear certain things from the media one side, you'll hear different things from the media another side. You'll hear snippets from people who've served in a conflict, but when you start doing what you've done and really researching things, like with anything that's going on in the world, you'll find there's a lot more that meets the eye. There's lots of underhanded dealings. You've got to think of who benefits when decisions are made. We can talk about big pharma, we can talk about governments, we can talk about the media, we can talk about the elite. There's people with things to gain, and there's a population to cull, there's arms deals to have. So at the end of the day, it's very interesting, isn't it? So we're going to play this choice of yours from the Jam, and then get a bit more into the book, and then obviously what you've been doing since the conflict and what led to you writing this book, and all the research that you've done as well. So we're back very shortly, guys.
The screech of brakes, the flat light blinking, that's into city of solitude, getting a cafe, traveling on buses, reading the graffiti up a sassy to fans. That's entertainment. That's entertainment.
Well, the classic there from The Jam, and that was the choice of our second guest this evening on La Vida Liverpool Live, Paul Cardin, who is a veteran of the Falklands War, a researcher and author. Who's recently released the book Return to Bomb Alley. We've been talking about the book, and how it exposes a lot of things, and there was potentially some big cover-ups happening. So Paul's talking about, leading up to the war and lots of strange things that were going on that can suggest basically that, it was a planned thing that was convenient for all parties concerned. We're talking about, we're going to be talking about a bit more, about, some key incidents. I mean, one of the key incidents in that 1982 war, the thing that really kicked things off was the sinking of the Belgrano when, there's lots of controversy around that, was it sailing away, blah, blah, blah. So, the British, sunk the Belgrano, and that was the thing that really kicked things off. So, Paul, that was a key moment of the war.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a bit more about what your book exposes about that key moment that really made things kick off?
Okay. Yeah, probably the best thing to say first is there we were on the ships, and everyone was hoping for peace. Nobody really wanted this to go the way it was going. But when the Belgrano was sunk, which was the first ship to be sunk on the 2nd of May 1982, it sank in for everybody that there was no going back from that point. Okay, and obviously when I was researching the book, and certain information becomes known to you on the day, on the 1st of May, the day before the sinking, we had what Rear Admiral Sandy Woodward described as a pincer movement developing, a threat developing against the task force. Now, Rear Admiral Woodward told us about this in his book, which was called 100 Days, and this was released in 1992. So I was thinking, why did it take him 10 years? Why did it take 10 years for us to get a justification for sinking the Belgrano? A final justification for why we did this.
Yeah.
And I was researching my book, and I discovered that on the 1st of May, as this pincer movement was developing, the northern arm of the pincer was a Argentine aircraft carrier called the 25 de Mayo.
Okay.
The southern arm of the pincer was the Belgrano.
Mm-hmm.
And the pincer, imagine two pincers coming together, each ship coming together and closing in on the task force. That's the idea of the pincer movement.
Okay.
Now I need to go into how these ships are armed. The Belgrano had 15 6-inch guns, and it was an old World War II vessel. It had 10 5-inch guns as well, but it was 350 miles away from the task force when it was sunk. It was down away to the southwest of the islands. We were away to the northeast of the islands, so the islands were in between the vessels.
So were you saying that we sunk the ship when it was out of range and no threat to us?
But that's my position, I'm afraid. After researching this, the Conqueror, HMS Conqueror, the submarine, torpedoed the Belgrano on the 2nd of May in the evening. Yes, and just to pick up the armaments of the Belgrano, if it had come close enough, it would have destroyed our carriers very easily.
Yeah.
But it would have had to reduce its distance by 336 miles.
Yeah.
To do that, because the range of its guns was only 14 miles. Okay, so to me, and if it is sailing away from us and from the islands, then I know it can turn at any moment, I know that, but it had been sailing away for 14 hours and not changing course. So I'd assumed it was going to carry on that course, okay?
Okay.
It could have turned around, that is feasible. But it still would have taken a lot of time for it to get back to us, 350 miles away. But, right, this is crucial now, the northern vessel, if I went up top on the 1st of May 1982 and had a look at the sea, it was like a big blue billiard table. It was absolutely flat. On the Beaufort scale, it was 0. The wind force was 0.
Okay.
Now, very importantly, an aircraft carrier needs a headwind to sail into to launch its aircraft.
Yeah.
That ship had 6 Skyhawk bombers, and they would have been fully laden. They had to be fully laden. Each bomb was 500 pounds, so each aircraft had an extra 2,000 pound in weight. Those aircraft, there was no way they could launch that day. They would have just gone off the edge and into the sea.
Wow.
Okay.
So the Belgrano that we sunk, there was no chance that the planes they had on board could have launched to destroy us.
Not on the 1st or 2nd of May, no.
Wow.
If they had launched, we were within range. We were 150 miles away. And those aircraft have a battle radius of 700 miles, so they could go 350, drop the bombs, come back 350 and land safely. But on that day, and I'm sure Admiral Woodward must have been aware of this, clever man, very clever man, you've got to be to get to that level in the Royal Navy.
Yeah.
He would have been aware that those aircraft couldn't have constituted a threat on the day.
Interesting. So, what you're suggesting there is, it was a purposeful war on both sides, and of course, there's a lot which you touched on about, you got to think of who benefits from something. So the arms deals. So I'm right in saying that, the Israelis and the French and even us supplied arms to the Argentinians. Is that correct? And then am I right in saying that all the new weaponry and new technology that we used in the war, we could then go and sell to the Americans and say, look, it's tested in war. Is that right? What I'm saying?
Exactly.
All of that?
Exactly, and I think that that it's a brilliant point you've made. I think the perfect example of that is after the Sheffield was hit by an Exocet. They were valued at £250,000. The price quadrupled within days to £1 million. I've written that in my diary, which is actually inside the book.
It's crazy, it's crazy, isn't it? That it seems crazy to me that there's these absolute, it's difficult to say like a polite word on air, to be honest, for them. But these people running the elite, the people running governments, the people at the top, they're playing this silly, pathetic little games, and yet, there's loads of young lads shooting and killing each other in the name of what, and it's like,
on both sides. Both sides. My book criticises both sides very heavily.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like what's going on. It's just it's so sad that everyone follows. Military follows suit. Two leaders want to have a war. Why don't they just get in the ring themselves and knock the hell out of each other? You know what I mean? It's sad that everyone goes along and say, let's all kill each other for these guys.
Do you know what I need to emphasise, really? You're talking about the elites and the political leaders, and to focus on Mrs. Thatcher. I was speaking earlier about her movements, her sort of suspicious movements before the war. Her backbenchers were up in arms about her performance. There was about 60 of them. She only had a majority of 32 parliamentary seats, so there were enough backbenchers to actually make the government fall. That could have happened. They were not happy with her, and they wanted a new face. And it's a very sad thing to say, but sinking the Belgrano actually united those politicians behind Mrs. Thatcher. It's such a desperately cynical thing for me to say.
Yeah.
But they are actively cynical in doing that. I am passively cynical in remarking on it, and I hope to educate people by doing that.
Amazing stuff. And I think the world needs people who scrutinises and questions and researches things. It's amazing what you can find out when you research. You're like, hold on, That doesn't
Yeah.
make sense whatsoever.
That's right.
It's like that in any area of life, and
I think I've got radar for that. I've got to clock onto it straight away.
Well, we're going to play another one of your selections, which is John Otway, Really Free. So we're going to play that tune of yours now, Paul, and then in the final half of the show, we'll talk about what you've done since the Falklands, and what's prompted you to write this book, and what your plans are as a published author now going forward. But in the meantime, here's a little tune break, and we'll be back very soon, guys.
Well, I wake up in the morning. Tell me, baby, what do you see? I see my true love. She walks up and she kisses me. I say, oh, baby, that's really free. I go walking down to your house. Tell me, baby, is it good for me? Your mom and pa, they just want to kick me. I say, oh, baby, that's really free. Really free, really free, really, 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 really free. I try talking to your mama. Oh no, that's not good for me. Every time I go near your baby, you say, "Poor baby, that's really free." I try singing in the bathroom. Tell me, honey, with the heat on me. Every time you move towards my body, I say, "Poor baby, that's really free." Really free, really free, really, 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 really free. Click me. So I wake up in the morning. Tell me, baby, what do you see? I see my true love and she walks up and she kisses me. I say, oh, baby, that's really free. I go walking down to your house. Tell me, baby, that's not good for me. Your mom and pa, they just want to kick me. I say, oh, baby, that's really free. Really free, really free. Really, really, really free. Kick me.
That was a choice of our second half of the show. Guest Paul Cardin, local author and Falklands War veteran. That's a very interesting selection, that there, Paul. It's not often someone plays a track I don't know. I'd never heard that, but it's got a little bit of the fall going on. It's a bit punk.
It's pre-punk, yeah.
Pre-punk.
It's an inspiration for what came later, I think.
I found, am I right in saying that a lot of pre-punk and post-punk, it's quite the same?
Yeah.
It's gone full circle almost.
That's right, yeah. Yeah, it did.
I think there's. I was in Liverpool the other week, and I think the band's called. I might correct me if I'm wrong. Fontaines DC, I think they're called. They're like a funk punk. They're post punk. They're punk style, I suppose, Irish band, but very modern one. And it was so cool. The music, I really liked it, and that, it reminds me a bit of that track there. But I think, would you say the Fall and Sex Pistols are the biggest sort of punk kind of...
Yeah, and the Clash, yeah. The big ones, yeah.
Of course, the Clash. Well, I never heard that, so thanks for that, Paul.
Yeah, mate.
So we've been talking about this fascinating book that makes you think, all the points you've raised, it makes you think, hold on a minute, there's more going on here, for this war, the Falklands War of 1982. So, have you always been a bit of a, questioner, researcher? Has that always been in your nature? And following the war, between obviously 40 years of fighting the conflict in the Royal Navy and writing the book, it's a long period of time. I know we haven't got too long left, but basically, can you summarise what you've been doing since, and what's prompted you to, finally bring a book out?
Yeah, well, after I left the Royal Navy, I joined Manweb, which was the local electricity board, which became a company, and it got privatised in 1995. And I thought that'd be a good point to leave it. So I took a bit of redundancy money, and then I sort of retrained, and then I joined the local council. I'd got some electrical qualifications, and I joined the street lighting department.
Okay.
And then I'm the sort of person, if I see something going on that's not right, I'll and I get my facts right on it.
Oh yeah.
And I'm gonna report it. I'm afraid that's what I do.
Yeah.
And I blew the whistle on a financial scam that was going on at Wirral Council.
Wow, interesting.
Which is the local council here.
Yeah.
And at first I thought that this is the right thing to do. Let's tell the bosses what's going on. And I didn't expect the response that I got because straight away I was being treated like a troublemaker.
Okay.
And I noticed that all our records started going missing around me.
No
What's
way.
going on here, And then next thing, I'm suspended for 5 months. Honest to God. And they brought some bogus gross misconduct charges against me. The chief one was that I was a bully. I was bullying people around me.
Wow.
So, but anyway, we got to the end of that, and we got to the hearing where they were going to sack me, and I was there with my union rep, and we won, basically.
Brilliant, good on you.
They didn't have anything that would stick, type of thing.
It's great when the little man beats the big man, when you fight the power, and you win.
I beat Wirral Council, and then I moved to the private sector for a year. And then I went to Cheshire West and Chester Council, and I had a similar situation there. Same thing going on. I won't tell you the details of this one, but it wasn't a whistleblower, it was a complaint about one of my bosses. And same thing, they could have nipped it in the bud straight away and resolved it, but they chose not to. They thought, we'll fight him instead. So they thought they started treating me as a troublemaker. Same thing happened again. Bogus gross misconduct charges again.
Yeah.
A big range of charges. And then we got to the final hearing, which was on my 50th birthday in 2009. On my birthday, my 50th birthday, the final hearing.
Wow.
And I thought, why have they done that?
That's
bastards, But anyway, same thing again. I won. I just defeated them again.
Brilliant.
And it occurred to me later why they'd done it on my 50th birthday, because on that day I became eligible for my pension, which started in the Navy, went to Manweb, then went to street lighting at Wirral and Cheshire. So I'd passed my pension over, so it was 32 years worth of pension I got. And they didn't have the guts to tell me there and then that I'd won my case. They said, let's call this meeting off and let's come back in 2 weeks' time. That didn't happen. They actually rang my union rep the following Monday and told him that I'd won, sort of thing. So they didn't have the guts to sort of tell me to my face that I'd won.
Yeah.
But one thing that they did to me was they banned me from making freedom of information requests and personal data requests.
You can't ban someone from that, sure.
No, you can't. But you're talking about people with very deep pockets. So I just had to take it on the chin and not make any of those requests. They are your statutory querying rights. Everyone over the age of 18 in this country gets those, and you've got them for life. But I was one of those rare people who had them taken off me. But I got somebody called Hugh Tomlinson QC, who's the country's top privacy lawyer, and he fought my case for free. I didn't have to pay him, and he wrote a letter to them, which would have cost £1,000 normally, and the council just collapsed straight away as soon as they got a letter off Hugh Tomlinson.
So it's always been in your nature to stand up for what's right, justice. And if you see something's wrong, to report it, ethics, doing what's right. So you've been a whistleblower. That's really interesting. And, what's sort of like after all these years then prompted you to, and after all this crazy career stuff going on and, and all the, the conflicts within your career. So what sort of made you think, have you been researching the Falklands War and all these stuff for years, and it's always been in your mind to write the book, or is it something that what made you get into it?
Well, do you know what? If we go right back to 1982, when I was 22, I had misgivings even then, because I was thinking, why are we sending 30,000 soldiers, sailors and airmen 8,000 miles to rescue 1,800 people? It didn't add up to me. It didn't stack up at all, really. Because most people hadn't heard of the Falkland Islands. And if they had heard of them, they didn't know where they were.
No.
It was a very rare 1 in 100 person who knew exactly where they were, you know.
Yeah.
So they were my first misgivings. And obviously I fought the war, came back, and I left the year after. And the misgivings just grew as time went on. And then every 10-year anniversary it came up, you know, it's in the news every 10 years.
Yeah.
And every time I thought, I should do something about this, I should write a book and sort of expose what's going on, you know, from my point of view.
Yeah.
And eventually I did that after 40 years, you know, it took me time obviously, but I did it eventually, and here we are.
Brilliant. Well, just before we have to wrap up then, tell us, it's a fascinating book, Return to Bomb Alley. Where you mentioned it's in Lingham's, but where would you, if people want to check the book out, where can they find it?
Well, it's on Amazon. You know,
Amazon,
most authors do go to Amazon, and it's an e-book, and it's also a printed book on Amazon. But it's also at Barnes and Noble, and it's in about six other different locations that are not coming to mind at the moment. But if you just type in my name, Paul Cardin, Return to Bomb Alley, the Falklands Deception, you just Return to Bomb Alley is enough. Type that into a search engine and you'll get pages full of it, and all the different locations where you can buy the book are there. Or you can go to Lingham's.
Nice. Well, I want to see you writing another book about, like, I want to see, because I wouldn't like you, you know, against, you know, as my enemy, you know, you're a very, very clever man, and you don't miss a trick, and you research everything, you stand up for what's right, and I've got a lot of respect for that. And, you know, I want to see you now, you know, doing some kick-ass research on other stuff that's going on in the world. And I don't want to say too much.
Something I haven't mentioned is that over the last, since I left Wirral Council, or since I left Cheshire West and Chester Council, I've been helping people. I've got a blog. It's called WirralInItTogether.blog.
Yes.
And what I do is it exposes local authorities and the stuff that they get up to.
Brilliant.
I've also got a YouTube channel where it's just my name, Paul Cardin, and I've done videos on there, and you can look at them and see what I've been involved in. For example, Wirral Council was abusing disabled people, and they actually took £736,000 from a number of their own council tenants in Morton, here in Morton.
Yeah.
And that was exposed. And I've done a lot of work on that, and I've done videos on that as well.
And that's Wirral In It Together to find out more about those.
Yeah. And I also help people who are getting bullied in the workplace. I've been doing that for probably about a dozen years as well.
Go ahead.
So, yeah.
Good on you. Yeah. Well, I'm all about that, standing up for injustice, you know, fighting the power, you know, and it's great to hear that the little man wins from time to time. So we got to wrap up there. Paul, you're a legend. Thanks so much for coming on, mate. And we'll be going for a pint, no doubt, with Rusty and Julio and Eddie and the guys at Rock Point and the other veterans.
Cheers, Justin.
Nice one, mate. Cheers.
kindness, my tears clear my blindness. While I'm worth no room on this earth, I will be with you. While the chief puts sunshine on me, I'll thank him for his work in your birth and my birth. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Was broken, my heart was broken. Sorrow, 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 sorrow. My heart was broken. My heart was broken. You saw it, you claimed it. You touched it, you see